What is going on, everybody? Today's a very special episode. Every single one of my DMs now will be answered. Finally, I can just point them to this video. Today, we are comparing, contrasting the R3 versus the Ninja 400. Spite, are you excited to do this one?
Yeah, it should be a good one. It should be interesting. Perhaps not the fastest, but
yeah,
it'll be good.
Yeah. So, the reason why we're comparing and contrasting these bikes today, of course, is thanks to our beginner bike giveaway series. So this R3 is actually on its way being shipped to the new winner. I chatted with him and said, hey, we're gonna do a video with the 400 and the R3 comparing them. Would that be cool? He said yes, so this is our final ride with the R3 before it heads out. And the Ninja 400 is actually up for grabs. So if you wanna learn how you can win the Ninja 400, a Honda CB650R, or a DRZ 400, click the link below to learn more about that. But without further ado, let's check out these motorcycles. So before we take these bikes out on the road, I thought it'd be important to go over specs. Everyone loves specs, everyone loves talking about specs, so let's check out the differences between these two bikes. So the Yamaha R3, first of all, most important thing, it's powered by a 321cc parallel twin engine. It's gonna make 36 horsepower at 10,700 RPM at the rear wheel. We're gonna be using rear wheel horsepower. God, that's hard to say. Rear wheel horsepower today, because I feel like that's a real world metric and that's something that's actually measured instead of what manufacturers claim. So 36 horsepower and 19.8 foot-pounds of torque at 9,000 RPM. So what does the Ninja 400 make?
So the Ninja 400 is powered by an actual 399cc, not quite 400, but we'll give them that extra one. It's making 43.4 at the ground horsepower. And that's at 9,900 RPM. And then at 82.5, it's making 24.6 foot-pounds of torque, which is actually a little bit bigger than the R3.
Yeah, so, I mean, much like everyone knows, because this has a bigger engine, it's gonna make a bit more torque, but the real kind of story there is that it makes torque kind of all through the rev range, and so when you're lower down in your RPMs, this thing's gonna give you a bit more pulling power, and we're gonna see that out on the road. But yeah, it definitely is a healthier, kind of bigger engine that's found in the Ninja 400. The other big thing I wanted to talk about as well is tires. I think it's kind of overlooked in this segment, but both of these bikes come with the Dunlop Sport Max GPR 300, which is a big improvement over the bias ply tires that the original R3 used to come with and the Ninja 250 used to come with. So both of these bikes wear proper sport bike tires, but this one has a 140 at the rear, but the Ninja 400 has a 150 at the rear. So Spite, talk us through about why you'd want a 150 versus a 140. What's kind of the differences there?
So, I mean, for me, that's splitting hairs, honestly, because on the street, I don't personally believe you're gonna really feel the difference between a 140 and a 150.
Okay.
However, when you're taking it to the track, you are going to make a little bit of extra traction through a turn on that 140. Or on the 150 rather. You'll have a wider arc that you can turn through. That's going to feel really narrow. But again, on the street, where I think most of these bikes see their use, it's really not that big a difference. I personally believe you'll need to step up to something like the 180 that you see on a proper bike.
Yeah, you'll definitely notice the difference there for sure on the bigger tire. But a really popular mod for the R3s of the first generation and the Ninja 300s were putting a bigger 150 section rear tire. So I think it is cool that Kawasaki just said, hey, we're just gonna give you a 150 from factory, there you go. So
that is a nice nod.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. The other thing as well is the 400 has a bit bigger brakes, right?
Yeah, this has a actual 310 millimeter, you say semi-floating disc. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it actually does make a difference having that wider lever that you're pulling through on your brakes. It's gonna help tow this thing down to a stop just a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think that I've ridden the 400 a little bit and the R3 obviously, but once we take them on the road, I'd love to see your comparison on that brake feel. But I think the bigger brakes on the 400 definitely give it a bit better braking feel than the R3, and so I think it's nice that Kawasaki gave you those bigger brakes. The other big thing to notice as well is the wet weight. even though the 400 has a bigger engine, it somehow still ends up only weighing, I think it's actually lighter than the R3, isn't it?
So this is 366 pounds wet.
Yeah, and the R3 is 368 pounds wet, so it's
So a
2
whole
pounds
2
lighter.
pounds. But that is factoring in the factory exhaust systems on both bikes. So when we pull this big behemoth off and put something nice and light like that Acura on here, now you're really starting to talk about a decent weight difference.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think, especially on these bikes, that's a huge difference on the street. Yes, you'll accelerate faster. Yes, you'll stop faster. But we're talking about a machine that's making 43.5 horsepower.
Yeah, but
So-
the butt dyno is going to feel good.
Sure. It's going to sound.
Yeah.
It's actually going to sound,
Yes.
which is nice. This is like sounds like a wood chipper.
Yeah.
So
A little bit. Although the induction sound is nice, but yeah. So the final point as well is price. R3 comes in at $52.99 MSRP for the ABS version, and the Ninja 400 comes in at...
the Ninja 400 is $54.99. So you are paying a little bit more for the price, or for the pleasure of your little bane of existence here.
That is true, yeah. It's $200 more expensive for the 400, but I think at the end of the day, if you are already going to spend, $5,000, $6,000 on a motorcycle, an extra $200 isn't going to be too big of a deal. That's like what, 3-4% of the price of it. So you can kind of factor that in. The big difference as well between these two bikes are their ergonomics packages. That's not something that's listed in the spec sheets, but the R3 actually has lower clip-ons, a little bit higher peg placement than the Ninja 400, makes it a little bit more of a sporty riding position. So let's get big ol' Spite over here and do an ergonomics check on these two bikes.
This will be good.
So how does it feel ergonomically?
So I'm not a fan. I'm very particular about how I like my tanks. All of the bikes that I've had have had really big, high-winged tanks. So if you look at this right here is where you're meant to be grabbing on to the bike. And for me, it's very tight. I'm also probably way bigger than the intended buyer. But
You're what, 6'3"?
6'3", 230.
230, yeah.
So I'm getting pretty close to maxing this bike out.
Yeah.
That said, it does feel pretty nice and sporty.
Yeah.
So you can tuck all the way in if you wanted. You'd look a little silly, but you can do it.
Yeah. I find the R3 to be pretty comfortable, honestly. Like, I find it's a place you could sit for a long time. One thing I love about the R3 over the 400 is the fact that there's not a whole lot of fairing right here. So it feels a little tighter, a little bit more compact. Just because I'm a Yamaha fanboy, I love the R1 kind of replica cutouts right here.
Yep.
And the cuts in the tank. It just makes it feel a little bit more sporty, a little bit more fun. It definitely feels like your foot's a little bit higher on the R3 versus the 400, and you can kind of get into that tuck position a little bit easier. So I find it to be pretty comfortable.
If you go back into that tuck, your elbows are over your knees like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you're definitely it's not. It would need to lower your knees just a little bit more for you to really get into that perfect tuck. But again, it's a very good looking bike, and someone of your size looks probably better on it than me. And
we can put a side by side of how Spite looks versus how I look on the bike. That might be funny.
Yeah.
Let's get the 400. Let's see the ergonomics on that.
So actually, little side note, the kickstand on the R3 does feel better than the one on the Ninja 400. It's a little thing.
Okay.
But
you like the way it kind of kicks out a little bit
It
better?
also has that nice little peg for you to grab with your heel. This doesn't. It's just a stick.
Yeah. So can you tell the difference between the two?
Yes. So this is a more comfortable bike for me to sit on.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the wings in the tank, they're a lot higher up. They're a little bit narrower on this bike. And another thing about the tank, this is actually metal.
Yeah.
Whereas that is a plastic case.
Big difference. Yeah.
And I will always prefer a metal tank.
Yeah.
As far as the seating position, this is much higher up. I can feel the difference just immediately.
Yeah, I mean the clip-ons, you can tell they rise up out of here as opposed to the other one that's just flat.
Yep.
You know.
So this is it's almost feels like you're on a naked bike. Which makes sense because I think a lot of the chassis and pieces are shared between the Ninja 400 and the Z400.
Yep.
which is Kawasaki's naked bike offering.
Yeah. The one thing I've noticed on this bike, swinging a leg over it, is this exhaust can really gets in the way right here. And you can tell, I feel like they kind of put this cut out for you to kind of maybe put a boot there or something, but I really don't like this. It feels like there's always something at my heel, kind of in my way. I think the R3 stock, even the AcroPipe definitely removed a lot of it, but stock it felt a lot better in that regard. But yeah, like this thing is just tremendously comfortable. Like it's just like, look at that. Boom.
You're basically sitting straight upright, and the seat's a little wider too.
Yeah, it is for sure. Yeah, I feel like the tank is a little bit tighter. It's a little bit more narrow right here and sits up a little bit higher, like you said. But visually, this feels so much more substantial. I think that's the funny part about it. Like this bike looks like it'd be heavier, but it's lighter than the R3 because this is just all, plastic stuff.
Yeah, and I think that they tried to make it feel like a bigger bike. It's got about as much in front of you as my VFR does. However, to your point, this is all just set dressing. I mean, you can look right through and see the head there, and there's nothing here. And right there, you've got your coolant tank just sitting right under the fairing. So I think they went for that full sport bike look without giving a whole lot of thought to the look inside the engine.
But to your point, visually right here, I mean, I've ridden 2 ZX6s on track, ZX10s. Like this looks like a ZX type of bike. It doesn't feel like a Ninja 400. It feels like from the cockpit here, you're like, oh, like this is like a proper like super sport Ninja motorcycle. So it definitely feels the part, which is cool. Yeah. But with that being said, let's get these bikes on the road and let's see what they're like to ride. Yeah, let's get these bikes on the road. I think we've talked enough. Let's just get out and ride them. So you're on the R3. We rolled in here. Do you want to get on the R3 again? Do you want to swap to the Ninja 400 so you can start?
Let's swap.
Yeah, I want to get you on the Ninja 400 to see what you think.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, man, that's a big bike to some people. So, a little bit of an unfair comparison, but the R3 does have this Acra slip-on, so it has a little bit of a better bark to it. But let's get going here.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
it's funny not having that, I don't have that thing catching my heel over here on the R3. It's nice. Yeah, I can definitely hear the exhaust more on this bike because of the slip-on, but do you notice the induction on the Ninja 400?
Yes, I can definitely hear it, which is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not looking forward to following you with those goddamn Yamaha turn signals, man.
Yeah, that's something we didn't mention in the garage, but these turn signals are just so awful on this bike. There's no reason they should be here.
It's 2019 Yamaha.
Why are they doing it? No one knows.
Like even the Ninja has better ones on there. Like they actually look kind of good. They're still incandescent, but
yeah, but they're integrated, and they look cool.
Well, even the ones in the tail are these nice little blades.
So one thing I wanted to see what you thought about. Try hitting the brakes on the 400 and tell me how you feel about them versus the R3.
Oh, they're way better.
They're better, aren't they?
Yeah, no, just that little bit. The front brake feels a lot stronger. I don't feel like I need to use both, front and back going into a turn.
Yeah.
Which just, goes back to that 310 versus, a little under 300. You have a little bit of more of a lever that you're towing it down through, gives you a little bit more torque on the brake. And I will say the little 400, just riding back to back, it actually feels like it has a little bit more bite coming out of a corner.
Yeah, I think that's due to those 150s at the rear. I think you do, even though I know in the garage you mentioned that you feel like it's splitting hairs, but I do think you get that extra bit of grip, that extra bit of wideness to it, and I think it does subconsciously make you feel a little bit better about it, you know?
There's also, you can put down just a little bit more power too.
Yeah. The one thing I do notice of the R3 versus the 400 is this is definitely the rev-happy version of the two. Like, this bike loves to be high in the RPMs, doesn't feel stressed at all being super high up there. It feels like the 400 likes to be a little bit lower down in the revs, because it doesn't rev as high as this. This bike redlines at like 12.5, which is pretty high.
Oh my god, I hate this clutch lever though. It
really
feels awful. It's so light and squishy. It doesn't give me any nice feedback of where the bite point is.
Right.
I guess maybe it's because the bite point's so far out.
It is quite far, isn't it? I noticed that.
But it feels awful. I don't know what we can do to fix it, if we can do anything to fix it, but it's not good.
So one point that we didn't talk about in the garage that I think we should mention as well is the suspension. So both bikes come with the 41 millimeter forks on the front end of it. The monoshock at the back is basically the same, but the big difference is that the Yamaha R3 has inverted front forks, whereas the Ninja 400 has right side up forks. But as we mentioned, I think the big difference is the suspension tuning from the factory. Since both of these are unadjustable, you're kind of stuck with whatever Yamaha or Kawasaki think is the best blend of street and track and road duty for these motorcycles. So having ridden the R3, what do you think about the suspension on the Ninja 400?
I think that they're pretty comparable, all things considered. I mean, they are punching in the same price point, so one's not going to be amazingly better, but I am noticing less dive on this bike. And it may come from my weight, it may come from the bike's weight, but it really is less divey than the R3. The R3, I can really feel it pitch down if I grab a big fistful of front brake.
Yeah, I think it's the R3's suspension, because it's that KYB, it's that upside down fork, it feels just a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more kind of like, you know, it just feels a little bit more compliant through the bumps and those kind of things. But the dive itself, I think the Ninja's set up a little bit more stiff. Like, I'm gonna jump on the brakes here, and there's not as much dive here, but the Ninja over bumps just feels really kind of rattly. It's quite stiff from factory.
Yeah, I actually am feeling a lot of what you're mentioning here, where basically every little bump in the road, I do feel it. And I can get used to it. You know, my VFR sends a lot of feedback through that front fork, but over a distance, that'll get pretty exhausting pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love this R3, man. Just the way it revs out, just looks cool. Do you mean to honk?
No, I meant to clear my turn signal.
I thought there was something up ahead. I was like, what's going on? How do you feel about the extra torque shove from the 400? It's pretty noticeable, huh?
Yeah, coming out of a corner, it feels a lot better than the R3. It felt like the R3 just, you know, you give it a lot of throttle and it's kind of felt like a rental car, you know, where...
Interesting. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like it's super compliant coming out of turns, and I love the way it wants to rev out. But I do think the 400 flicks in quicker, for sure. It flicks in faster.
See, for me, maybe this is just the way that I ride. I prefer a lot of grunt coming out of a turn. I add a lot of power once I hit the apex of a turn. That's just the way that I ride.
Yeah.
And the R3 didn't really want to do that. It felt almost too linear. This, I can really kind of just twist the throttle and go.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a little bit more get up and go for me, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think, you know, going back to what we were saying, like, who are these bikes for? I think if you're a larger rider, the Ninja 400 makes a lot more sense than the R3, I think.
Absolutely.
You're gonna want that extra torque, you're gonna want that extra power.
See, I'm slow into a turn and I'm fast out. That's just the way I ride, and it does what I want it to do.
Yeah.
man, that just coming off the R3, the Ninja 400, that clutch lever is really bumming me out. Everything else is so good, and it's such a weak spot. There's got to be something we can do to fix that.
Yeah, if I could somehow combine the rev-happy nature of this engine with the extra torque bump of that that Ninja 400, plus the flickability of the Ninja 400, because I feel like it flicks in so beautifully into corners. I love the way that bike flicks in. The R3 just feels a little more sluggish to get leaned over, which you wouldn't expect, but it does.
God, I love this bike. Just the way it feels through a turn, very good.
It's good, isn't it?
It's like a little baby VFR for me.
Yeah. But one thing I think as well with the Ninja 400 versus the R3 is that, and we mentioned this, the R3 feels more premium in the cockpit for sure.
So you want to do a little roll-on test here?
You want to roll on? All right, let me get up next to you. What gear are you in?
I am in second.
Okay. I'm in second now. Let's clear this off this road and see where it goes. All right, you ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. I got the jump on you.
Yeah, but I was able to hang with you, which
Yeah.
I was not able to do on the R3.
Nope. Yeah, we didn't record that bit on the R3, but when I was on the 400, yeah, I just kind of left you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is really telling for the R3 and the Ninja 400, because, like, you know, you weigh a good 40-50 pounds more than me, and so the torque of that engine really helps out for you to keep up.
It's just another thing where I would put a little nice check mark for a big guy on a little bike. It's got to go to this one for me.
Yeah. Man, I will say, this R3, though, I love the way this thing revs out. I don't feel like I get that with the 400. Like, you can rev it out, but this just feels so free revving.
All right, roll-on mode.
All right.
I'm fourth
what gear are you in?
Fourth gear, 34.
Okay, on the third beep, all right?
All right.
Oh, come on!
I'm leaving you.
Bye. But it was neck and neck, though, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of folks will look at the R3 or the Ninja 400 like, oh, they're not going to have good, like, or they'll look at the 400 and be like, oh, it's going to have way more, like, passing power, low down on the revs, but it just so depends on the rider's weight and size, man. Like, bikes are so small, like, especially these bikes coming in at 360 pounds, like, a rider's weight makes a big difference.
I mean, I'm 230, so, you know, I weigh 100 pounds less than this motorcycle does, 130 pounds.
Yeah.
Less. That's huge. I'm almost doubling the weight of this bike. But with that said, it's still it's keeping up with that bike with you on it.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm much more GP spec. I'm 170 pounds because all the beans and avocados I eat, but I'm just race spec, man, you know?
I will say though, the seat on this, not a huge fan of it. It is a little wider, but it's a lot stiffer than the R3.
Yeah. Gosh, this bike down a twisty road is so much fun, man.
It looks great in motion.
Try to get this over rev. Well, that was a load of fun.
These are great little bikes just to go on a nice, beautiful day ride out in the hills. I mean, this is where these live.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, final verdict. Let's do this. So, I'll give my final verdict, and you can give your opinion, because I think we're a little bit different. If I had to choose one, I would still choose the R3. I know that its on-spec performance is not as good as the Ninja 400. I know that the initial flick in for me on the 400 is like unbeatable in this class. It's almost as good as the RC390 in my opinion, but I just love the way this bike revs out a little bit more. I love the suspension. It feels just a little bit more compliant, a little bit more plush. It's not as crazy stiff as the 400, and yeah, I think it's just, for me, I love a bike that I can look at and just be like, damn, that thing looks sick. And the gold forks upside down, just for me fits the bill,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I have to go with the Ninja. I really do. Just because of its bigger size. I can fit on it as a bigger rider. The way that you can just give it a little bit more power out of a turn, and it'll just pull you through where it felt like the R3 didn't. Mm-hmm. And just in general, the ergonomics package and the dash, it feels more like a bike that I would want to ride.
Yeah. And I think for you, as we mentioned, like depending on how, what size of rider you are and what you're looking for, maybe that extra bit of torque is really going to help you out. It makes a big difference. Got 6 extra foot-pounds of torque, about, let me do the math really quick. That's roughly like 25% more torque than the R3. So that's a good amount. So R3, you're definitely going to need to be on the boil, really kind of like, revving it out. And if you like doing that, it's great. But if you just want something that just really pushes out of corners, the Ninja 400 is going to have you covered a little bit better.
Yeah, this makes more power where I personally would use it. Plus that front end, gotta give the R3 props. It looks great. But this is a really nice, aggressive, mean-looking front end.
Yeah, I like it. I like its stubby little nose right here. I think from the side it looks really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
It's reminiscent of the freaking H2, man.
Yeah, it is actually. It does kind of look like the H2. That DNA is. They're both Ninjas technically.
Yep.
Which is crazy. Alrighty, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today. I think we've pretty much fully covered these two bikes. At the end of the day, I think whichever one you go with, you're gonna be happy, and if it's definitely your first bike, dude, you're gonna have a blast on one of these, man. These bikes give you all the tools you need to get into sport bike riding, to really understand it, and not get in over your head. Dude, you can haul all kinds of ass on these bikes, man. I've seen guys on tracks ripping by people on 600s and even 1000s on these things, so it's all about the rider. So I want you guys to keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that this bike is being given away. I gotta plug myself in here really quick. So if you're interested in winning this beautiful Kawasaki Ninja 400, click the link below. Learn more how you can get entered to win. And yeah, it's gonna be a good one. Someone's gonna get this bike for free, which is pretty sweet. And then that bike over there is getting shipped off in the next couple of days, which is awesome. So yeah, any final thoughts, Spite?
No, I think you summed it up just fine. It's you really can't go wrong with either of these. It really is going to come down to personal preference. Go ride them both, and if the dealership, any good dealership will let you ride them both.
Absolutely, yeah. And if they don't, you shouldn't buy a bike from them. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up. I will catch you guys next time. See you later.